Welcome back to Glowing Lantern Books. I'm Monica Benet, and today's 5 tips are to help you fight feedback fatigue. We all know the feeling of grading an endless pile of papers, especially when they're essays or analytical responses like close reading assignments. These assignments lead to the greatest grading fatigue because processing students' analytical responses requires an intense focus on the teacher's part. Today's video is to help you stay focused and be efficient. Let's get started. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the video to figure out how to have students look at all the feedback you've been so busy giving them. Tip 1. Narrow your focus. When possible, think about how to grade your assignment before even giving it to the students. This might help you think of any modifications in sentence structures or questions that you can change prior to giving it out. For instance, it might help you realize maybe I can give 4 questions instead of 5 questions on this close reading assignment. So taking just a few minutes before giving it to your students can help you make any necessary adjustments to make that grading process a little easier. Continuing with the close reading example, I realized that I don't need to evaluate every single answer they give on such an assignment. My students need ample practice, so giving them 4 problems helps to address this area, but that doesn't mean I have to look at every single answer they give. Perhaps I could just look at 2 out of the 4 answers and evaluate those. Make sure that you are consistent with the 2 that you choose for every student. For instance, if question number 3 is really challenging for everybody, it's not fair for you to only evaluate number 3 on some students, but not for other students. Another approach might look like this. For a close reading assignment, I know that usually my preliminary questions are stepping stones working up to that final question, which usually addresses something like theme. So for one of my close reading assignments, I might only look at that last theme question, and I might also be evaluating, did they integrate their responses from the prior questions into that last one? And that might be something I tell them in advance to do as well. But I might not tell them in advance that I'm only going to look at that last question when I'm grading their assignment. When you narrow your focus, you help yourself to stay concentrated on just a couple questions that you're evaluating so you can provide higher quality feedback to every student instead of experiencing a little bit of teacher burnout by the time you're halfway through your grading pile. Tip 2, grade in chunks but make your first chunk the longest. The reason you want to make your first chunk the longest one is because I know, for instance, whenever I start grading, it usually takes me a few assignments to get acclimated to the assignment I'm grading at that time. Even if it's something I've graded before last year in the past or something like that. It also takes me about 5 assignments to start noticing patterns in students' work. This is where I start making a bullet list of the things that I'm noticing. Maybe students are having a lot of trouble with number 2 and finding examples of indirect characterization to bring up. Maybe I need to insert a chart that addresses the STEAL acronym for indirect characterization to help bridge the gap to get students to be able to answer that question. During that first slow grading chunk, go for as long as you can. If you're on a planning period, use that whole planning period. And then whatever remaining assignments you have, grade those in chunks at a later time. Tip 3, develop a list of essay comment codes. I know that when I'm grading, I tend to start making the same comments over and over on paper after paper. So once I start grading something new, what I start immediately doing is creating a comment bank. So this means that I just start writing down the comments that I notice I have been giving the first couple of students. And as you continue to do this, you'll eventually create enough comments to cover the spectrum of the remaining students that you have in general. And you might be able to go and find a general essay comment code sheet already created online, but sometimes your assignments are very tailored to what you're doing and you'll just naturally start creating those comments yourself. If you're grading online, simply copy and paste those comment codes directly into your students' assignments. And if you are grading by hard copy, then what you can do is create a list of your comment codes and put numbers by them, and then you just write the number on the student's essay. So that way you're not writing as much, but also you're providing them with more feedback than you would have been able to handwrite on their essay. Because not only can you address the error on your comment code, but you can also explain to the student how to fix the error too. The combination of making a list of what to look for while grading and creating a comment code bank while grading is going to help you focus your attention and make you much more efficient. Tip 4, grade your assignments as they come in. Some teachers like to have students submit all their work first and then designate Saturday as their grading day. And they say, I'm not going to look at this assignment until that time. This can work with some assignments, but for some lengthier assignments, such as essays, when you go to actually evaluate the work can become so involved that you enter the feedback fatigue zone much faster than you anticipated, which means that maybe you get through fewer assignments than you anticipated, and then after that first long grading chunk, every subsequent chunk of grading you do gets shorter and shorter. It's a great idea to have a designated day to handle a bulk of work, but take advantage of the time when you're maybe on a planning period and you're sifting through your email and suddenly, bing, you get an alert that a student just turned in an assignment. Stop what you're doing, immediately open up that assignment and take a look at it. Resist the urge to close that window and tell yourself, I'll handle it later. Grade it right then and there. The more you get into this habit, the overall amount of assignments that you have to grade when you go to do your grading haul is going to get smaller and smaller. It's typically more efficient to keep grading as things come in. Sure, it's not always possible, but when the opportunity arises, don't even think about it. Just take advantage of it. Tip 5. Streamline your rubrics. As an English teacher, I try to create a set amount of rubrics that I always go to with my assignments. Essentially, I have the same rubric that I use to analyze their analytical responses. If they're writing an essay, I have a rubric for each part of the essay that I'm looking at. What I like about this system is that every time I go to grade a new assignment, I'm not trying to figure out the confines of a new rubric, and your students aren't either. So if I give my students 7 different analytical assignments in 1 quarter, I might use the exact same rubric on each one. Even if the assignment looks different, if the skill is the same, so is the rubric. Having familiarity with your rubrics and using the same rubrics is not just good for you, it's good for your students too. Students like to know what your expectations are. And sometimes students just aren't very good at looking at the rubric. So if you keep using the same one over and over, you're going to emphasize its importance and draw more attention to that rubric for the students. Hopefully meaning that they're going to pay a little bit more attention to it too. Okay, the moment you've been waiting for. So you've been working so hard giving all of this feedback to your students, and then the concern is, well, wait, my students don't look at my feedback. You're the teacher. Make them look at your feedback. Create a reflection where they need to go back to your feedback and figure it out and synthesize it into their own reflection. Then you're bringing in metacognition, and this allows them to start thinking things like, oh, this is why I've been having trouble here with this section. This is what I need to do in order to fix this part. Giving these types of reflection assignments are going to ensure that students are comprehending what you are telling them. It's going to get them to look at it, and it's going to help them better understand your future feedback a little bit faster too. And furthermore, reflections are pretty easy to grade if you choose to do so. Thank you all for watching. If you have any tips on how you fight feedback fatigue, please leave your suggestions in the comment section below. The more that we share with each other, the more that we can learn from each other. Thank you all, and until next time.